Hi, welcome back to English Honors English 2 or English 2 if you're watching this a little later after I make it. We are going to be reading through chapter 9 today. Um, I am not in the video today. You won't see my face, but it's because I'm at home and I don't feel super great, so I'd rather not be on camera today if that's okay with you. But I did throw my Bitmoji up there so that you could imagine me reading to you regardless. Chapter 9 is a big deal. It contains, I believe, to be the biggest climax of the story. Um, Something really large is going to happen that's going to kind of change the tide and make whatever happened on Animal Farm irreversible. You could argue that the slaughter of the animals in Chapter 7 is probably another type of climax in which we see Napoleon's reign come to a heightened, um, just horribly mean um, point, but I think that chapter 9 really contains the actual climax, the turning point of this novel, where it just cannot come back from it. I have chapter 9's questions pulled up over on my right hand side, so make sure that you've copied them and pasted them into your own documents so that you can work alongside me if you'd like. And feel free to pause if you need to do that really quick. The questions are going to look a little different than some of the ones prior to this. They're a little more involved, so I am looking for some more thoughtful, more insightful answers. So please make sure that you make a habit of doing that. In chapter 9, we're going to start off with Boxer again. Um, and in the previous chapter, we see the animals or the pigs change even more commitments. I mean, the pigs get drunk and then like run around the farm lot with a bowler hat on, but and then they decide like, yeah, alcohol is fine. And in fact, we're gonna see, and we see them do this throughout the novel. We're gonna come back to that at one point, but just know that's kind of where we're at. All right. In chapter 9, I'm going to get started reading. So feel free to open your books alongside me. If you are reading the book at home, chapter 9 starts on page 111. All right. Boxer's split hoof was a long time in healing. They had started the rebuilding of the windmill the day after the victory celebrations were ended, and Boxer refused to even take a day off of work and make it a point of honor to not let it be seen that he was in pain. And in the evenings he would admit privately to Clover that the hoof troubled him a great deal. Clover treated the hoof with poultices of herbs, which she prepared by chewing them, and then both she and Benjamin would urge Boxer to work less hard. A horse's lungs do not last forever, she said to him. But Boxer would not listen. He said, only one real ambition left, which was to see the windmill well under way before he reached the age of retirement. At the beginning, when the laws of the Animal Farm were first formulated, the retiring age had been fixed for horses and pigs at age 12, cows at 14, dogs at 9, sheep at 7, and for hens and geese at 5. Liberal old age pensions had been agreed upon. As yet, no animal had actually retired on pension, um, but of late the subject had been discussed more and more. Now, the small field beyond the orchard had been set aside for barley. It was rumored that a corner of the large pasture was to be fenced off and turned into a grazing ground for superannuated animals. For a horse, it was said, the pension would be £5. The pension would be 5 pounds of corn a day in winter, and 15 pounds of hay, with a carrot or possibly an apple on public holidays. Boxer's 12th birthday was due the late summer of the following year. Meanwhile, on the farm life was hard. The winter was as cold as it had been, and the food was even shorter. Once again, all the rations were reduced, except those of the pigs and the dogs. A too rigid equality in rations, Squealer explained, would have been contrary to the principles of animalism. In any case, he had no difficulty in proving to the other animals that they were not in reality short on food, whatever the appearances may be. And for the time being, certainly, it had been found necessary to make a readjustment of rations. Squealer always spoke of a readjustment, but never a reduction. But in comparison with the days of Jones, the improvement was enormous. Reading out the figures in a shrill, rapid voice, he proved to them in detail that they had more oats, more hay, more turnips than they had in Jones's day, and they worked shorter hours, their drinking water was of better quality, they lived longer, there was a larger proportion of their young surviving infancy, and they had more straw in their stalls and suffered less from fleas. The animals believed every word. Truth to tell, Jones and all he had stood for had almost faded out of their memories. Sounds a little bit like the lottery. They knew that life nowadays was harsh and bare. They were often hungry and often cold, and they were usually working when they were not asleep, but doubtless it had been worse in those days. They were glad to believe so, at least. Besides, in those days they'd been slaves. Now they were free. That made all the difference, as Squealer would never fail to point out. There were many more mouths to feed now. And in the autumn, the four sows littered all simultaneously, producing 31 young pigs between them. The young pigs were piebald, and as Napoleon is the only boar on the farm, it was possible to guess their parentage. It was announced later that bricks and timber had been purchased, and a schoolroom would be built in the farmhouse garden. And for the time being, the young pigs were given their instruction by Napoleon himself in the farmhouse kitchen. They took their exercise in the garden too, and were discouraged from playing with the other animals. And at about this time too, it was laid down that as a rule that when the pig and another animal met on the path, the other animal must stand aside, and also that all pigs of whatever degree were to have the privilege of wearing green ribbons on their tails on Sundays. All right, so if we look at this chapter so far, we look at questions 1 and 2 and even 3. Um, let's look at number 1 first. So we're seeing the food is continuously being pulled to reduction. Okay, so the animals don't believe they're eating less food, but they are eating less food. It's never a reduction; it's a readjustment, as they always say. And so the food continues to be less and less and less, even though the animals may not believe that. And number 2, Squealer, who represents propaganda, works hard to convince the animals that their reality is not true. What 2 techniques does he use to comfort the animals when they get to get them on his side? I'm going to change that word comfort to get. I don't like that language. All right, so he consistently utilizes facts and figures to basically make them believe that their reality is not their reality, in a way to kind of work against what their minds think. And then when we think about another way that he works against that, he consistently threatens them that the animals are free, and that if they don't let them do what they want, that Jones will come back consistently throughout the whole novel. Right. Number 3, the divide between the animals and the pigs continues to grow. We see them; the pigs are not allowed to play with the other animals, and if an animal comes along up a pig on the path, it is up to the animal to step aside. We are consistent. There is definitely a large kind of class divide here. The pigs seem to be kind of the upper crust, upper class, whereas the other animals are kind of lower class. They aren't as good as the pigs. All right. Um, so let's continue on. And they get to wear clothes. The farm had been fairly successful, but it was still short on money. There were bricks, sand, lime for the schoolroom to be purchased. It would also be necessary to begin saving up again for machinery for the windmill. There was lamp oils and candles for the house, sugar for Napoleon's old table. He forbade the other pigs on the grounds that it made them fat, and all the usual replacements such as tools, nails, string, coal, wire, scrap iron, and dog biscuits. A stump of hay and a part of a potato crop were sold off, and the contract for the eggs was increased to 600 a week, so that this year the Ents barely hatched enough chicks to keep their numbers at the same level. Rations reduced in December, reduced again in February, and then the lanterns in their stalls were forbidden to save oil, but the pigs seemed comfortable enough and in fact were putting on weight if anything. One afternoon in late February, a warm, rich, appetizing scent, such as the animals had never smelt before, wafted across the yard from a little brewhouse which had been disused in Jones's time, and which stood beyond the kitchen. Someone said it was the smell of cooking barley, and the animals sniffed the air hungrily, wondering whether this warm mash was being prepared for their dinners. But no warm mash appeared. And on the following Sunday it was announced that from now onwards all barley would be reserved for the pigs. The field beyond the orchard had already been sown with barley, and the news soon linked that every pig was now receiving a ration of a pint of beer daily, and with a half a gallon for Napoleon himself, which was always served to him in the Crown Derby soup tureen. And so now they're getting drunk all the time. But if there were hardships to be borne, they were offset by the fact that life nowadays had a greater dignity than it had before. There were more songs, more speeches, more processions. Napoleon had commanded that once a week there would be something held called a spontaneous demonstration, the object of which was to celebrate the struggles and the triumphs of Animal Farm. At the appointed time, the animals would leave their work, march around the precincts of the farm in military formation with the pigs leading, then the horses, then the cows, then the sheep, then the poultry. The dogs flanked the procession. At the head all marched Napoleon's black cockerel. Boxer and Clover always carried between them the green banner, with the hoof and horn and a caption of "Long live Comrade Napoleon." And afterwards there was a recitation of poems in Napoleon's honor, and a speech by Squealer giving the particulars of the latest increases in production of foodstuffs, and on occasion a shot was fired from the gun. The sheep were the greatest devotees to spontaneous demonstrations, And if anyone complained, as few animals sometimes did when no dogs or pigs were near, of course, that it wasted time and meant a lot of standing around in the cold, the sheep were sure to silence them with a tremendous bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. But by and large, the animals enjoyed these celebrations. They found it comforting to be reminded that after all, they were truly their own masters and that they did work for their own uh, benefit. So that with the songs and processions, squealers, lists of figures, the thunder of the gun, the crowing of the cockerel, the fluttering of the flag, they were able to forget that their bellies were empty, at least part of the time. In April, Animal Farm was proclaimed a republic, and it became necessary to elect a president. There was only one candidate, Napoleon, who was elected unanimously, and on the same day it was given out that fresh documents had been discovered that revealed further about Snowball's complicity with Jones. It now appeared that Snowball had not, as the animals previously imagined, merely attempted to lose the Battle of Cowshed by means of stratagem, but had openly fought on Jones' side. And in fact, it was he who had actually been the leader of the human forces. They're changing the history. And charged into battle with the words "Long live humanity" upon his lips. The wounds on Snowball's back, which the other animals still remembered, had been inflicted by Napoleon's teeth. They have completely changed the history that the animals remember. All right, number 4. The farm is declared a republic. Who's elected president? How do they manage to win? So Napoleon is elected president, and he is the only candidate on the ballot. So of course he wins. It's easy to be the number one choice when you're the only one there. All right. All right. So in the middle of the summer, Moses the raven suddenly reappeared, and after an absence of several years, he was quite unchanged. I mean, he still did no work and talked in the same strain as ever about Sugar Candy Mountain. He would perch on a stump, flap his black wings, and talk by the hour to anybody who would listen. Up there, he said, solemnly pointing to the sky with his large beak, up there, just on the other side of the dark cloud that you see there, it lies, Sugar Candy Mountain, the happy country where we poor animals rest forever from our labors. He even claimed to have been there on one of his higher flights, and to have seen the everlasting fields of clover and linseed cakes and lump sugar growing on the hedges. And many of the animals believed him. Their lives, now they reasoned, were hungry and laborious. Was it not right to want a better world to exist somewhere else? A thing that was difficult to determine was the attitudes of the pigs towards Moses. They declared contemptuously that his stories about Sugar Candy Mountain were lies, and yet they allowed him to remain on the farm, not working, with an allowance of a gill of beer a day. All right. So if we wanted to look at number 5, Moses makes a reappearance here, and brings up Sugar Candy Mountain yet again. And the animals are a lot more open to it this time, specifically because life on Earth seems to be really difficult. And they're like, why can't we wish or hope for something that's a little easier? All right. After his hoof healed up, Boxer worked harder than ever, and indeed, all the animals worked like slaves that year. Apart from the regular work on the farm, the rebuilding of the windmill, there was the schoolhouse for the young pigs, which was started in March, and sometimes the long hours on insufficient food were hard to bear. But Boxer never faltered. In nothing that he said or did was there a sign that his strength was not what it had been. It was only in his appearance that was a little altered. His hide was a little less shiny than it used to be, and his great haunches seemed to have shrunken. The others said Boxer will pick up in the spring when the grass is when when the spring grass comes on. But the spring came and Boxer grew no fatter. And sometimes on the slope leading up the quarry, when he braced his muscles against the weight of a vast boulder, it seemed that nothing kept him on his feet except for his will to continue. At such times his lips were seen to form words of "I will work harder." He had no voice left, and once again Clover and Benjamin warned him to take care of his health, but Boxer paid no attention. His 12th birthday was approaching. He did not care what happened so long as he had a good store of stone accumulated before his pension. Late one summer a sudden rumor ran around the farm that something had happened to Boxer. He had gone out alone to drag a load of stone up for the windmill, and sure enough the rumor was true, and a few minutes later 2 pigeons came racing in with the news. Boxer has fallen. He is lying on his side and cannot get up. After about half the animals on the farm rushed out to the knoll where the windmill stood. There lay Boxer between the shafts of the cart, his neck stretched out, unable to raise his head, his eyes glazed, his sides matted with sweat. A thin stream of blood had trickled down his mouth. Clover dropped to her knees by his side. "Boxer," she cried, "how are you?" "It is my lung," his voice said. "It does not matter. I think you will be able to finish the windmill without me. There is a pretty good store of stone accumulated. I only had 1 month to go in any case, and to tell you the truth, I had been looking forward to my retirement. Perhaps as Benjamin is growing old too, they will let him retire with me and be a companion." "We must get help at once," said Clover. "Run, somebody tell Squealer." All the other animals immediately raced down to the farmhouse to give Squealer the news, and only Clover remained, and Benjamin, who lay by Boxer's side without speaking. He kept the flies off of him with his long tail. After about a quarter of an hour, Squealer appeared, full of sympathy and concern, and he said that Comrade Napoleon had learned with the deepest distress that to the misfortune of the most loyal workers on the farm, and was already making arrangements to send Boxer to be treated at a hospital in Wellington. The animals felt a little uneasy about this, and except for Molly and Snowball, no animal had ever left the farm, and they did not like to think that the sick comrade in hands of the human beings. However, Squealer easily convinced them that the veterinary surgeon in Wellington could treat Boxer's case more satisfactorily than could be done on the farm, and at about a half hour later, when Boxer had somewhat recovered and had gotten with difficulty to his feet, he managed to limp back to his stall, where Clover and Benjamin prepared a good bed of straw for him. And for the next 2 days Boxer remained in his stall. The pigs had sent out a large bottle of pink medicine they had found in a chest in the bathroom, and Clover administered it to Boxer twice a day after meals, and in the evenings she lay in his stall and talked to him while Benjamin kept the flies off. Boxer professed not to be sorry for what happened. If he made a good recovery, he might expect to live another 3 years, and he looked forward to the peaceful days where he could spend in the corner of the big pasture. It would be the first time he had leisure to study and improve his mind. He intended, he said, to devote the rest of his life to learning the remaining 22 letters of the alphabet. However, Benjamin and Clover could only be with Boxer during working hours.
Mic off. Mic on.
During working hours, and it was during and it was in the middle of the day when the van came to take him away. The animals were all at work weeding turnips under the supervision of a pig when they were astonished to see Benjamin come galloping from the direction of the farm buildings, braying at the top of his voice, and it was the first time he had ever seen Benjamin excited. Indeed, it was the first time he had ever seen anybody gallop. Quick, quick, he shouted, come at once. They're taking Boxer away. And without waiting for orders, the pigs broke off of work and raced back to the farm buildings. Sure enough, there in the yard was a large closed van drawn by 2 horses with lettering on the side, and a sly-looking man in a low-crowned bowler hat sitting on the driver's seat, and Boxer's stall was empty. The animals crowded around the van and said, "Goodbye, Boxer," they chorused. "Goodbye." "Fools, fools," shouted Benjamin, prancing around the outside with his small hoofs. "Do you not see what is written upon the side of the van?" That gave the animals pause. There was a hush. Muriel began to spell the words, but Benjamin pushed her aside, and in the midst of deadly silence he read, "Alfred Simmons, horse slaughterer and glue boiler, Wellington. Dealer at hides and bone meal, kennels supplied." Do you not understand what this means? They're taking Boxer to the knackers. And a cry of horror from all the animals at this moment of the man on the box whipped up his horses, and the van moved out of the yard at a smart trot, and all the animals followed, crying at the top of their voices. Clover forced his way to the front. The van began to gather speed. Clover tried to stir her stout limbs to a gallop and achieved a canter. "Boxer," she cried, "Boxer! Boxer! Boxer!" And just at this moment, as though he had heard an uproar outside, Boxer's face, with that white stripe down his nose, appeared in the small window in the back of the van. "Boxer!" cried Clover in a terrible voice. "Boxer, get out! Get out quickly! They're taking you to their death!" And all the animals took up a cry to get out "Get out, Boxer, get out," but the van was already gathering speed and drawing away from them. It was uncertain whether Boxer had understood what Clover had said, but a moment later his face disappeared from the window, and there was a sound of tremendous drumming of hoofs from inside the van. He was trying to kick his way out. This time, the time had been when a few kicks from Boxer's hoofs would have smashed the van to matchwood, but alas, his great strength had left him, and in a few moments the sound of drumming hoofs grew fainter and died away, and in desperation the animals began appealing to make the 2 horses stop. "Comrades," they shouted, "comrades, don't take your own brother to his death," but the stupid brutes, too ignorant to realize what was happening, merely set their ears back and quickened their pace, and Boxer's face did not reappear in that window. Too late, someone thought of racing ahead and shutting the 5-barred gate, but in a moment the van was through it and rapidly disappearing down the road. Boxer was never seen again. All right, so if we look at number 6 here, um, Boxer gets injured, and within 2 days, the pigs manage to acquire and have somebody, a glue boiler and horse slaughterer, come and pick him up. Okay, he is never seen again, ever. And why do you think the pigs choose to do that? I mean, if he was healed, he could become, retired and still be on the farm. So why should the other animals be nervous about the thought of what happened to Boxer? I mean, as soon as he's injured, as soon as he's no longer useful to the animals, to they sell him off to a horse slaughterer for money. All right. Um, 3 days later, it was announced that he had died in a hospital in Wellington, and in spite of receiving every attention a horse could have, Squealer announced the news to the others. He had said he had been present during Boxer's last hours, and he said it was the most affecting sight I have ever seen, said Squealer, lifting his trotter, wiping away a tear. I was at the bedside till the very last. At the end, almost too weak to speak, he whispered in my ear that his sole sorrow was to have passed on before the windmill was finished. Forward, comrades, he whispered, forward in the name of rebellion. Long live Animal Farm. Long live Comrade Napoleon. Napoleon is always right. Those were his last words, comrade. Here Squealer's demeanor suddenly changed. He felt silent for a moment, and his little eyes darted suspicious glances from side to side before he proceeded. It had come to his knowledge, he said, that a foolish and wicked rumor had circulated at the time of Boxer's removal, that some of the animals had noticed a van which took Boxer away was labeled horse slaughterer, and actually jumped to the conclusion that Boxer was being sent to the knackers. It was almost unbelievable, said Squealer, that any animal could be so stupid. Surely, he cried indignantly, whisking his tail and skipping from side to side. Surely he knew that they knew that their beloved leader, Comrade Napoleon, better than that. But the explanation was really very simple. The van had previously belonged to a knacker, but had been bought by a veterinary surgeon, which had not been painted the old name out. This was how the mistake had arisen. The animals were enormously relieved to hear this, and when Squealer went on to give further graphic details of Boxer's deathbed, the admirable care he had received, the expensive medicines for which Napoleon had paid for without thought to their cost, their last doubts disappeared, and the sorrow they felt for their comrade's death was tempered at the thought that at least he had died happy. Napoleon himself appeared at the meeting the following Sunday and pronounced a short oration in Boxer's honor. It had not been possible, he said, to bring back their lamented comrade's remains for interment upon the farm, but he had ordered a large wreath to be made from laurels in the farmhouse garden and sent down on Boxer's grave. In a few days' time, the pigs intended to hold a memorial banquet in Boxer's honor, probably just between the pigs, and Napoleon ended his speech with a reminder of Boxer's two favorite maxims: I will work harder, and Comrade Napoleon is always right. Maxim, he said, that every animal would do well to adopt as his own. And on the day appointed for the banquet, the grocer's van drove up from Wellington and delivered a large wooden crate in the farmhouse. That night there was the sound of uproarious singing, which was followed by the sound of a violent quarrel that ended at about 11 o'clock with a tremendous crash of glass, and no one stirred in the farmhouse morning before noon on the following day, and word went round that from somewhere or another the pigs had acquired money to buy themselves another case of whiskey. All right. Uh, so that the pigs totally use Boxer's death here as a way to get the other animals on their sides. They use it to further push this idea of obeying without question. And we're going to see that for question 7. All right. So take some time, make sure you get the questions done. I'll be checking those soon. And if you have any questions at all, let me know. Have a great day, guys, and I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.